Hello, welcome to the show for this week. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics, joined by the usual suspects. My assistant, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
And Melissa Conway from Texas Right to Life.
Hi.
And another one of the usual suspects, Elizabeth McClung. You're probably the worst of the usual suspects, I'm guessing.
Define worst.
More feisty, I guess, is the worst. You'll go with that?
I'm not going to argue.
Well, great. Well, anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about this month, and we'll be getting to it in just a moment. But first, we're going to take out 2 minutes for Life in 120.
New York abortionist Robert Rowe has been indicted for manslaughter after he botched an abortion on 30-year-old Jamie Lee Morales. Authorities say that even though Miss Morales was bleeding profusely and had collapsed in Rowe's abortion clinic, he ignored the signs she was in trouble and dismissed her. In the car going home, she fell off the back seat and into the floorboard, where she became unresponsive. She was later pronounced dead at a Bronx hospital. According to IRS documents, in 2014, Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards made a little over $950,000. At an average of about $500 per abortion, that means over 1,900 babies were killed during that year in Planned Parenthood facilities in order to pay Richards' salary. The pro-life community has often claimed that an unborn child's heart starts beating in just a few weeks after conception. But now researchers at the University of Oxford in England are saying it might actually start much sooner, possibly as early as 16 days after conception. The evidence for this was discovered during a study funded by the British Heart Foundation and published in the scientific journal eLife. In Mississippi, the city of Jackson has been cooperating with the abortion lobby in an effort to prevent nonviolent pro-lifers from protesting at the state's only remaining abortion clinic. Now, in a stunning turnaround, the city has backed down and conceded that the sidewalk and grassy area in front of the facility is public property, and that the pro-lifers have a constitutional right to be there. To settle a lawsuit brought against the city by Life Legal Defense Foundation, the city also agreed to pay monetary damages to the plaintiffs, dismiss all criminal charges against them and other pro-lifers, and return all fines and fees collected from them in the past.
We've got some interesting things to talk about. We're going to have a lady on from Wisconsin here in just a minute to talk about some things that are going on there. But before we get to that, this is a very disturbing situation. Medical school dean at University of New Mexico has now admitted, confessed, if you will, that they had high school students participate in a camp at the University of New Mexico this summer. And one of the things they did was allow them to dissect the brains of aborted babies that the university had apparently gotten from a local abortion clinic. I'm telling you something, if I found out my kid went to some sort of camp at a college and dissected aborted baby brains while they were there, there'd be blood in the water as far as I'm concerned.
I'm curious to know what they told these students.
What they were doing.
If I were sitting there dissecting a baby's brain, I wouldn't have done it. I would have gotten up and left.
Right. And by the way, these were brains of babies 24 to 28 weeks in gestation.
And babies that could have lived.
These are babies that are viable.
Viable.
That could have,
Yeah.
They were living, but that could have survived.
That could have survived.
If these people had left them alone, if they hadn't been dragged into a death camp,
Yes.
abortion mill, and executed,
Yeah.
they could have survived. We've been doing this show since 1999, and we've always had these horrible situations. But you would think that eventually you'd get to the point where you say, okay, that's the worst it can get. It can't get any worse than that. And then every week, or every
Something new
month,
comes out.
something new comes out. But you're going to run a camp at the University of New Mexico, and you're going to allow children to dissect the brains of babies you bought from an abortion clinic?
Right.
You've imprinted into the life of that high schooler that disregard for that unborn child is normal
No big deal.
and commonplace. And on top of that, it's good fun to have
Right.
summer camp
Right. We're going to
at the
dissect.
expense of this baby.
And we're not just talking about dissecting frogs or cats like you normally see in high school classes. These are human beings.
That's right.
A human baby that was killed intentionally. This is not like, it'd be one thing if you said, well, these were babies that were stillborn or they died in a car wreck or something like that. These are babies bought from an abortion mill, which means they were killed intentionally. They were brought to this death camp and they were executed intentionally, and now we're going to let high school kids chop up their brains.
Yeah, and this stems back from even David DeLayden selling the people that were purchasing the baby body parts. They were part of that.
Yeah,
and they
University of
lied.
Mexico was,
Yes,
right.
yeah, and they lied.
And this stands in stark contrast to one of the things that he was sharing with me recently when he was in Houston. He mentioned that even though they were undercover, that he and Sandra wanted to make sure they were, anytime they viewed any of these babies who had been dismembered and mutilated and aborted, they wanted to approach with such an attitude of respect for the dead.
Reverence.
Yes.
Of reverence, yes.
Yep. All you need to do on this story is just report it. You don't really need to comment on it. It speaks for itself. It's outrageous. There's some things going on in Wisconsin. We've got 3 Wisconsin stories this time around. And we're joined by Jade. Is it Hrdi, Jade? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
That's correct, yes.
I've never seen a name with 4 letters and 3 consonants, but here we are. H-R, and the 3 consonants are all together, Hrdi.
Right.
But anyway.
It's Croatian, actually.
Oh, it is?
Yes,
That's interesting. All right, and you're with Pro-Life Wisconsin, is that right?
that's correct, sir.
And what do you do for Pro-Life Wisconsin?
I am the communications director up here at Pro.
Well, that's kind of like what you do for Texas Right to Life, right?
Yes, sir.
Same kind of deal. So this is your parallel. We got 3 stories. You had originally contacted us about one of these, but I knew you were familiar with all of them, so we want to talk about it. An auditor's report, I assume this is from the state of Wisconsin,
Yes.
found out that over half of Planned Parenthood's payments were fraud.
That's exactly right. It's another story you almost don't have to comment on. You just tell them that percentage, and people are shocked, right? 50%. That's crazy.
You know, here's the deal. If you are a supplier of, let's say, parts for cars or something to the state of Wisconsin, and you're caught overbilling like this or committing, the state didn't say this was a mistake. They said it was fraud.
Right.
To your knowledge, Jade, has anybody from Planned Parenthood been arrested on this deal?
No, not yet. And of course, that always happens with them. They do these things consistently, right, at Planned Parenthood facilities, and nothing happens. Nothing happens to them.
Well, this is a very familiar story. It happened here in Houston back in 2013, I believe.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so easy for them to overbill. Because of the Hyde Amendment and not being able to bill for certain things, they can break anything down that they want to and overbill.
They unbundle these
Unbundle it.
They unbundle these abortion procedures that they're not supposed to be paying for, and they unbundle them, and you pay for each individual component.
That's right.
And the thing you're talking about was Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast here in Texas.
Yes.
They paid back to the state of Texas $4.3 million.
Millions.
Million. Now, and I remember at the time that this happened, this is the incident that you're referring to. At the time this happened, they didn't even put up much of a fight about it. They said, okay, well, here's $4.3 million back. So, which means that they knew they were guilty. They were culpable here. But again, I asked the question, if this was fraud, why was no one arrested? And it's the same thing that's happening in Wisconsin right now.
This is Planned Parenthood.
It's Planned Prophethood.
There you go.
Right. Very,
exactly.
very clever. We're very.
That should be
I like that.
Yeah, we like that. Plan. You've got another story there, Planned Parenthood in Madison, I guess it was.
Yes.
A botched abortion that put a woman in the hospital, and apparently they went to some pretty Herculean efforts to cover this up. What do you know about that situation?
Unfortunately, we don't know a lot because these files were redacted, of course, and to some extent, medical files, 911 calls, protecting the privacy of a patient, that should be redacted. But this call, if you guys have heard it, the whole thing is bleeped out. All you can hear is a couple questions from the 911 operator. You know, every time Planned Parenthood or another abortion facility calls an ambulance, it just shows us that abortion isn't safe. We already know it's not safe for the child, and it's not safe for the mother either. And of course, Planned Parenthood doesn't want people to know that.
Of course not.
Women knew that they could die, that they could bleed out, have hemorrhaging, like this case in Madison this summer. They wouldn't have abortions.
You know, Troy Newman in Operation Rescue did some investigation on this, and he said, quote, somebody obviously went to a lot of trouble to conceal the truth from the public. And he's exactly right. And this is what we see in every one of these cases. You mentioned the 911 call. You'll get these 911 calls where they'll say, we have a woman in real distress. She's bleeding out. She's unconscious. this, and this. Oh, by the way, when you come here, don't have a siren on. And come around to the back door. Don't come to the front, and don't make a big deal out of this.
Or sometimes they send the employees with the patient that's hemorrhaging or whatever is wrong
In a
with
car.
her to the hospital.
In a private
Yeah,
car.
right.
And there have been those cases where those patients died because the abortion clinic didn't want to call an ambulance to the facility because they didn't want people to know they'd hurt another woman or killed another one.
What's the frequency? I know here in Houston, we actually track it and we're able to tell the number of incidents that have been happening. Is there a high frequency of this type of thing happening in Wisconsin?
It's not just Wisconsin, but here's the fact. In my book, Line 5, I wrote a chapter about this called Cooking the Books. Anybody that tells you, here are the statistics on the safety of abortion or the danger of abortion, is lying to you because no one knows. That's what the abortion industry has been very good at, is obfuscating the figures. So we can't sit here with any credibility and say one in every so-and-so gets this, one in every so-and-so gets this, one in every so-and-so gets this. Nobody knows. The CDC that creates these figures is a snake pit, and I have another whole chapter in Line 5 about this, and it's still going on to this day, is a snake pit of pro-aborts. They have what's called the ASB, the Abortion Surveillance Branch at the CDC, and they're the ones who surveil all the abortion statistics for the country. It's always been run since the day it was created, and it was created actually before Roe versus Wade. It's always been run by pro-aborts, mainly David Grimes. At one time when he was running the CDC's Abortion Surveillance Branch, he was a practicing abortionist at the same time at Atlanta Surgery Center. So you have practicing abortionists, which the CDC does not allow to happen in any other field. You have practicing abortionists surveilling the safety of abortion. What do you think is going to happen? We caught them changing records, changing how they acquire records, changing what constitutes a abortion injury and what doesn't.
Right.
And so there's no way of knowing.
Well, legislatively, we need to make a change. We need to change the law. And we've talked about this in past weeks, that the reporting standards are just so skewed and totally off the books. Well, the only way that we can change that is by requiring that they're held accountable. And I have a voice as a voter. You have a voice as a voter. And I think our legislators, if pushed enough and we stand up and are vocal enough, they will get off their duff and start doing some things to require more clarified reporting standards.
But let me point something out to you. The CDC is the one that does this, and the CDC is a fraud. It's a fraudulent organization, and I absolutely proved that in Line 5. At least when it comes to the abortion issue. And we even asked them at one point, when we found out that 100% of the people who have run the abortion surveillance branch of the CDC have either been practicing abortionists or members of the National Abortion Federation or members of NARAL, one of the three, and sometimes all three at the same time. We asked them one time, right down the hallway from the CDC's abortion surveillance is the entity there that surveils tobacco deaths and so forth. I asked him, at that time, they had a woman running the abortion surveillance branch who was a board member of the National Abortion Federation. I said, would you ever allow a board member of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company to be the one that puts out all of the surveillance records on tobacco? And they said, absolutely not. That's a clear conflict of interest. I said, but right down your hall, you've got somebody that is in charge. 100% of all the abortion surveillance information that's put out by the CDC goes through this woman. And she's a board member of the National Abortion Federation. And you allow that to happen. Well, abortion's a kind of a unique situation. And, maybe that looks like it has some propriety problems. Or I can't remember. We've got a tape of what they said to us. It's obscene. But the interesting thing was, up until then, they were giving us information that we needed to put in Line 5. After that conversation, they said they would never give us any more information. We'd have to sue them under the Freedom of Information Act to get anything. They cut off all supply of information to us. But we caught them changing the way things are reported. So you're never going to know, and that's what Jade is talking about here. When I asked her, I said, "What do you know about this situation, Jade?" You say you can't really tell me anything because nobody knows anything.
And what we do know comes from sidewalk counselors who are out there every day trying to counsel women, but also reporting to us, oh, there was an ambulance here, or, someone fled the scene really quickly.
Yep. We were here at the office one day, this was several years ago, before, at one time, Denton, Texas was the smallest city in the United States with a freestanding abortion clinic. But mainly because we have two gigantic universities. University of North Texas got 40,000 students, and Texas Women's University, which is the largest women's university in the United States, are both here in Denton. And the abortionist at that time, Mary Smith, by the way, her husband's name was Joseph, so this was Mary and Joseph were our two local abortionists. She put her abortion mill right halfway between both of them. Almost exactly halfway between UNT and TWU. But we got a call one day here from a neighbor down there of the abortion clinic saying, hey, there was just an ambulance just left here, and it looked like they were really rushing. There was a lot of hubbub and going on, and they knew who we were, and they said, you probably want to follow up on this. And with all of our resources that we had, we could never find where that ambulance went.
Wow.
We never were able to tell where that ambulance went to, where they took this girl.
Safe and legal is their mantra, but really it's just legal and it's not safe.
It's a lie.
Yeah,
And we don't know how safe it is. We don't know how safe, we don't know how dangerous it is, and we're never going to know because the abortion industry doesn't want you to know.
Right.
And if you want to see how outrageous this was at the CDC, they created a hotline that women could call to see how, if you're thinking about having an abortion, I want to see how safe it is and how dangerous it is. CDC created a hotline, an 800 number that you could call in. All the figures that they put out were put out by NAF, National Abortion Federation, because that woman was on the board of NAF at the time that was overseeing the thing. So all the figures that were put out by NAF, but they didn't say that on the call that you made to the CDC. It says these are the CDC numbers. And so the abortion clinics, if you went into an abortion clinic and you started a question about safety, and they'd say, well, why don't you just talk to the Centers for Disease Control? That's the federal government. They don't have a dog in this fight. And they'll tell you this. And they'd put the girl on the line. She called the CDC, and actually she's getting numbers that were derived from that abortion clinic. They were the ones participating in the statistical gathering of evidence. And it was just this kind of incestuous relationship that existed. And it's a scam. To see how bad this is, at that time, most people don't even know the CDC is a government agency. They think it's a private entity. It's not. It's a government agency. They had 6,000 employees at the time when we were doing Line 5. Their budget was $250,000 an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was the CDC budget then. It's going to be a lot more than that now. Abortion is the number one most commonly performed invasive surgical procedure in the United States. They've got 6,000 employees. All the statistics put out by abortion had to go through one woman. And she was the one that was on the board of the National Abortion Federation. So she put out everything. And Grimes and Cates and Teetsy and Stubblefield and all these guys that had come before her had set up this system. But
Very
anyway.
skewed.
So, well, listen, Jade, if you do find out something about this, if something accidentally leaks out or whatever, be sure and let us know because we'd like to follow up on it.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, the news in Wisconsin is not all bad.
Right, we do have some good news. So despite the fraud, Planned Parenthood still couldn't keep one of its facilities open. We've been celebrating.
The thing I saw says that since Scott Walker cut funding to the organization in 2011, 6 abortion clinics in the state have closed.
Yes, that's
And
right.
you're down to, what, 2 Planned Parenthoods now?
Well, there's 21 Planned Parenthoods to do abortions, and then we have another private abortion facility as well.
Wow. So when you originally sent your email to us, what you wanted to do was to make sure people understood that, and it's something we've been saying on this show for years, the key to this is persistence.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's what you told us in the letter that you had sent to Renee, that you just got to be persistent, you got to be dedicated, you got to, stay in front of these people, stay after them, and not give up, and eventually you'll win. And there's nothing that pays off like persistence, nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So the facility that closed this summer had actually been, quote, temporarily closed since last September, but still we had vigils held on a daily basis outside that closed facility, people praying and people talking to families and women and men that came by, questioning, well, what are you doing? This place is closed. Well, we're still concerned about what's going on here. They could reopen, and it was just the constant repetition of people being there, praying about it, and talking to the community around that led to that closure.
Well, you are to be congratulated, because I know it's sometimes seems like unrewarding work, and you think, what am I doing here, And
It is.
I told Renee this story one time. I was in Boise, Idaho. I'd gone up there to give a speech and or a seminar or something. But anyway, they took me down to the local pro-life group there to introduce me to all their staff and so forth. And they had a poster there on the wall, and it was just a poster of this abortion clinic, and it was snow. Snow would look like it's probably about a foot deep. And you could see where somebody had been walking back and forth in the snow. And I asked them about it, and it was a kind of a poignant-looking scene. And they said that, well, that's where Sister so-and-so, who died not long ago, was a local nun. And they said she was in front of that abortion clinic, and it didn't matter what the weather was. And in Idaho, the weather can get pretty unsavory. And they said she was there. And she said that day she had walked back and forth and been on that sidewalk in front of that abortion clinic. And that's her footsteps there in the snow. And she had died fairly recently before I was up there. And they said this man had come by, took that picture of her footsteps in the snow in front of that abortion clinic. Well, it eventually closed. But that happened after this nun had died. But anyway, it's kind of haunting, to see this little footprints of this little nun walking back in front of this abortion mill.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. We have to be dedicated. We have to, and I think sometimes, I know this issue tests our commitment and our dedication. And I think sometimes that's what God wants. He wants to see, you say all these things when you're talking to me in prayer, or when you're just in your daily life, you say these things. But I want to see the action. I want to see more than just your words. I want to test you and see how committed you really are.
Right. And thankfully, not only we've God on our side, which is the best thing, but we're more passionate about this because we believe what we're saying. Pro-choice and pro-abortion advocates, they don't come out when the weather's bad. They don't show up. They don't stand on sidewalks. They don't pray about this.
Yep.
We're on the right side for sure.
Absolutely. Listen, well, thank you, Jade, and we look forward to hearing back from you. If you get something on this injury or death or whatever happened there, if you find out something, be sure and let us know.
Absolutely, I will. I'll keep in touch.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We're just about out of time, but I want to bring up one little quick thing here that happened with you guys recently. You were getting some notebooks or something produced from a company called Moleskine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're really recognizable for high quality notebooks and tablets. And we were creating some Texas Right to Life swag and wanted to emboss our logo on a Moleskine notebook, and then share those with staff and volunteers and donors and the like.
And they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. It was really shocking, actually. We were on a bit of a time crunch. We were planning to gift these to some folks, and we sent the order off, and we received notification back that they were rejecting our order. They didn't want to accept our money. They didn't care of the size or the scope, other than to say that we violated, our logo violated their standards, acceptable standards of imprint. And when pressed, I asked exactly what does that mean, and what was sent back is that we're too controversial. Just our sheer logo, Texas Right to Life, with a nice star and a ribbon on it, was too controversial. But the most controversial side to the story is the fact that this organization in and of itself advocates on lots of social issues,
right,
and advocates on lots of extreme issues, and they actually support the Global Fund, and which is supposed to be a humanitarian organization, but when you delve into it, they have no problem with advocating for so-called reproductive health.
Right.
So y'all have never used them before then? This was your first time?
This was our first time.
So anyway, so they turned down the business, basically. They can lie all they want to. They turn it down because you're pro-life.
Pro-life, right.
They're pro-abortion.
Right.
The same thing happened to us.
Right.
Yeah, we had started a lapel pin campaign, and at the very beginning of it, I had researched to see who we could go with that manufactured the pins and that were really good. And so I had reached out to a place called Pins Crafters, and they're in Vermont. I'd sent them the PDF of the pen, what it looked like, and they were excited about it. And we were talking back and forth,
Getting prices.
getting prices. And then I don't know what happened. The gentleman's name, not gentleman, but the guy's name is Steve Lipman. He must have talked to other people in the company, and they didn't want to use our business. They said, "Hi, Renee, Anna and I will pass on this order. Thank you, Steve." So the same thing happened with us.
And so we got them manufactured by somebody else. They didn't mind taking
Oh,
them.
no, not at
We
all.
did the same thing with our notebooks. We got them manufactured by somebody else who didn't have a problem with supporting life.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you, Cross.
But people need to know when dealing with you. And there's pro-life organizations all over the country have pens made all the time. And you might have a pro-life organization that's run by somebody who has a business that has pens, and they get them from somebody else. So it's not a pro-life pen, but it's just a pen. They need to know not to be dealing with these people.
That's right.
Because these are pro-abortion people.
Yep.
And they'll turn down cash business to support the abortion industry.
Yeah, and fundamentally, we're really glad to find out who Moleskine is.
Right.
And we have no problem whatsoever sharing the word that they're also not only against pro-lifers, but they're also against anyone of Christian faith, and they'll turn that business away. So I just challenge anyone that's pro-life Christian to turn away Moleskine's business.
If you ever have the opportunity.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is pretty blatant.
Boycotts are effective.
Yep. But, let's see, what have we bought? 50,000 pens or something like that? We bought 25,000 the first time, and
Yeah, I think about 50,000.
about
A lot.
50,000 pens we bought. And we're still using them, and the company that we bought them from is happy to have the business. And
And they're beautiful pens.
they are nice. They're very nice pens.
Thank you.
So we're happy to give them the business instead of this bunch of baby killers up here in wherever it was,
Vermont.
Vermont. Anyway, great show, guys. Once again, you're doing a great job. The usual suspects
Thank you.
lurking nearby. Thanks. We're out of time for this week. Until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how this killing is going to stop.